Alright, Fanatics, here we go again, and I am back to a series I started and got a third of the way done with, and then set aside to start working on some other video projects, such as the Army Review series. But I am back to talk about the Match Play Guide, Match Play Scenarios. So my first one last time was on a hold objective scenario from Pool 2, and that was Domination. So I'm going to continue with Pool 2 because it just makes sense to do that. And the one I am choosing for this time is Capture and Control. Now, Capture and Control to me is one of the better scenarios. It's a much more balanced version than Domination, which was the first one I talked about for the Pool 2. And this is Scenario 9 in the book. And like I said, it's just more balanced. So in Domination, there was a centralized objective, and then you and your opponent placed the other four, two apiece, on the board, at least 12 inches apart, 6 inches from a board edge, so on and so forth. Go check out that video if you want to learn more. I'll leave a link in the cards. This one is a lot easier. The setup is pretty simple. You have the centralized objective, and then the other four objectives are equally spread apart, 12 inches, north, south, east, and west from the central objective. So 2 along the central line, from your board edge to your opponent's, and then 2 along the central line from like board half left to right when you're looking at it from your side of the table. And this is one of the reasons why it's better is where they're at. There's none of this, oh, hey, I can place my 2 tokens in a way to really help my army out. It's more one of those ones where it's, all right, this is where they're at. Now you've got to make your army adapt to that tactic and try and go and get them. So this has basically replaced Domination in most events. I'm not saying it's fully replaced it because, as I said in my other video, Domination is still pretty common, especially in a 2-day event. But for me, Capture and Control is one of those scenarios where if you're playing a new army, it can definitely be a good idea to practice this army or this scenario. Practice that army with this scenario. That way you can get a better idea of how the army will hold. Because the majority of the objectives are on the central line. So if you have a shield wall army, you're going to love the fact that this is a one where you're just going to deploy, march up there, and just try and push your opponent back, kicking them in the shins usually, as most shield walls work, and just try and push them and push them and push them away. Because this is not one where you have to be in an AoE area, area of effect, but area of control, whatever, for the objective. You just have to touch it and then be in base contact with it at the end phase, no enemies in base contact, in order to control it. After that, you can move off. So what happens in a lot of scenarios is players deploy, leave one guy sitting on the objective on their side at the beginning of the game, move the rest of the army up to push the center line, and then turn to move that guy that they left sitting on it to move in and help reinforce. And that's a one-man reinforcement, so it's not a lot. But that's what you see a lot of armies do. Now, that's not always the case. If you have an army that has mobility or it's a low models number, sometimes they'll just kind of hoard around that back objective and wait for the enemy to come to them and then try and outflank them. So what I mean by that is I'm looking at maybe one of those lower model count armies that has a lot of mobility. So like an Eagle army, for example. Some folks are probably going, what? Eagle army? I ain't never seen that. Well, I've seen several of them. And the old flying circus army where you had a number of wraiths on Felbies, this is a tactic they would do as well, is just sit on the back, make your opponent come to them, and then outmaneuver them, because if you have fly, you just fly right over your enemy ranks. And then you can go grab back objectives, you can grab the center line objectives, and then you put a couple guys in there on the flanks and start hurling folks down. So there are some tactics to that you could see as well. But that is, deployment, I already just talked about it, or setup. So deployment's a little different with this one as well. It's a 24-inch deployment area, but you actually have to roll to see where you deploy at. You choose your warband, you're alternating, and when you roll a d6, on a 1 through 3, you have to deploy in the front 12 of your 24-inch deployment zone. On a 4 through 6, you deploy anywhere. So if you're one of those armies that likes to sit back, then you can kind of get screwed in this because of the fact that if you have to deploy within the front 12, then your opponent, if they have a, we'll say a moving army with like all mounted Rohan or Khan, they're going to be on you in the second turn if you don't move back. And even then, they can still sometimes get on top of you if they do marches and stuff. So that's something you have to watch for as well. And definitely have that in mind when you're building an army. Is like, okay, so what of my units do I want to be on the front line and what do I not? And unfortunately, you cannot adjust this dice roll with might. So you just have to take it as the dice rolls. So for me, I'm usually right up there at the front because my dice roll low. So the game goes until one team is broken, and then once one team is broken, one player is broken, you roll, and on a 1 or 2, the game ends. Okay. The VPs are very easy for this. It's similar to domination. You're really just trying to control the objective. So for every objective marker you control, that's 2. So do the math. There's 5 objective markers, 2 points. That's 10 of your 12 right there. You're really pushing to get these objective markers. And then if you break or you wound the enemy leader, or you break the enemy, you wound the enemy, it's 1 point each. So you don't even have to try and kill your opponent's leader in this to try and grab some extra VPs. A lot of times what you'll see is like a shooting heavy army, they might focus all their fire for the first turn or two against the enemy leader just to maybe try and get a lucky cheeky wound in there. And if they do that, then after that, they don't worry about it anymore. That is a tactic I've done with my Rangers of Ithilien list and done it very well. If it's capturing control, all right, first turn, I'm putting everything I can towards my opponent and their leader. Now, obviously, not every shot will be able to affect the leader, but you get my point. And sometimes there's juicier targets out there, too, than the leader. So if you're fighting like a horde army, then we'll say Shire. You know, if you're fighting hobbits, then it might be better just to shoot all the individual hobbits and try and stack up some kills early game, because, you know, that might help you with numbers depending on how badly outmatched you are. And that's something that you can look at too. Is like if you're playing a horde army, well, breaking them is just as much as wounding the enemy leader. So which one is more likely to happen? Breaking a 100 model count army in a 2-hour time limit game, or potentially maybe wounding your enemy leader. So that's one of those things where it's like, okay, I might have a better chance at wounding the leader than I will breaking them. But if they're smart, they'll probably have the leader like hidden. So hopefully maybe you have somebody with heroic accuracy, or you just take like 5 or 6 in the way shots if it's even possible. Because remember, you still have to have line of sight in order to shoot somebody. But something like that. So yeah, that's basically capturing control. There's not really a crazy amount to it. A lot of these videos, I'm just saying now, are probably going to be pretty quick, just based on the fact that I tried to go really in depth with the first 6. But scoring points wise for the rest of these are going to be pretty similar to the rest to other ones, and I'll just kind of draw back to those. And I'll definitely leave links in the cards section to the other ones for the pools. So yeah, that's capturing control. I mean, you basically deploy in like a cross formation, or not deploy. You set up the board in a cross formation. The only thing I would recommend is when you're building boards, definitely, I do believe that boards can screw you over for terrain, but I also don't think that the board should screw your scenario over. So if you have a board set up and you've got like this central object, and you're going to have to put a central objective marker, well, maybe you need to make sure that you can have the ability to scoot whatever object is there out of the way. Because if it's impossible for somebody to get to, I do believe that all victory points should be obtainable in a game for both players, not just one. And let alone a player at least, because if you got something high up on a board, like the top of a tower that has absolutely no way to get to it, then that's kind of stupid. So maybe move that tower a little bit out of the way. You know, just slide it forward, slide it to the side, whatever you have to do to make sure it gets there. But yeah, that is capturing control. Like I said, pretty simple. Most objective points, you're looking at trying to go ahead and control the objectives. So, yep, quick, dirty, got the nitty gritty in. Hope you guys enjoy. Please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you for the next Match Play Guide scenario review.